前のアルバムもそうでしたけど、この新しいアルバムはよりオーガニックなフィーリングが、作品の中にありますけども、それはジョシュも感じていることですか？
Yeah, that's just it. Well, we're really very much a live band, and we take recording in the studio as sort of something that is a little bit automated in a way. So what we try to do is really perform most of this stuff live. And strangely enough, this album, because of the time that we had allotted ourselves, was, I think, in part written a little more in a studio than previous albums, and I think that also was a component of the organic atmosphere that we recreated, and that's just it. I think that organic sound is really a matter of being honest. It's trying not to put on something that it's not, and we're trying to communicate sonically, and so that's kind of what was happening there. But at this moment, it almost feels a little euphoric. The way that we recorded this, it was really, I guess that's just a great deal of the recording process, and there's some of the magic in that. But and it lent itself really well to creating an album like that.
まあ今世界的にとても難しい時代だと思うんですけども、ちょっと通常じゃない時代性がありますよね。そういったものは今回のソングライティングに何か影響を与えていますか？
Yeah, that's a big question, and it's obviously this circumstance we're in has affected everybody, and it's been very different. And I think we've had the time to do a lot of meditation and reflection on the things that we had been involved with for the last 3.5 years of constant touring and constant revelry and all of this madness that's going on, like being in the eye of a storm. So I think that's kind of played a part in further artistic pieces, music, this or that, whatever it may be. I think it's going to lend itself to that a little bit. And you can hear that a bit in my way of seeing, even, that there's some sort of retrospective breath, and that there's this sort of first-person conversation. And I think that we had a little bit of time to do some writing and actually starting to grow even more roots and spread out and create more things. And we've done a lot of things that I think are going to go beyond this album in the last couple of months as well. But the time that this has allowed us, if we were going to be optimistic, has been great, and that we've been able to take a very complex album, a very dynamic album, and be able to sort of stretch it out a bit and give ourselves a little bit more to it. And then that also does come in the amount of sort of the visual representation of the album as well, and the album packaging and all of those things. But it's going to be really interesting to see what comes out of all of this, what kind of music is to come in the future, in the next couple of years, that might come from this experience, and hopefully a feeling of relief and all of that, comes through.
確か前のアルバム出してワールドツアーをたくさんやった時に、君たちは世界中の現状というか今といういろんなもうネガティブなものからポジティブなものまでいろいろ見て、それで感じたこと発見したことを、今回のアルバムの歌詞に流し込んでいるって話も聞いたんですけど、その辺ちょっと話してもらってもいいですか？
Yeah, yes, there are very mind-expanding experiences throughout the last couple of years, and I think that has really been a lot of inspiration to draw from in terms of the creation of music that we've been writing and putting out, and it's very strange because every day I become a little bit more aware of how small of a town we came from and how isolated from so much of what would be a big world. It was incredible to every day. I think, geez, a new thing comes in, or to perspective, and I think we're all the better for being able to step out and actually one of the most beautiful things I think about our travels is that you're meeting friends for the first time and they feel that they know you because they've listened to your music, they've listened to your commentary, so they kind of understand where you're coming from. And so that draws you even much more closer. So we've had a lot of warm embraces all over the world, and that's been another great source of inspiration because you see the faces of the people that you're creating all of this work for, and that fuels a great part of this process or our process. But to see poverty was just a strange thing. That was shocking, and well. It did something to us intrinsic. I mean, there's kind of like it's built in. You can't unsee things, and you have emotional reactions to them. And then it's sort of okay. Well, now we do have this platform, and it's our responsibility to be able to step out and do something. But then you also consider a lot of other things about the world and the way it functions, and there's political philosophies involved in that, and then you consider the importance of material wealth, or so there's themes like that you are kind of forced to consider, and I think that has been a big part of the growing process for all of us.
アルバムの1曲目のヒーターバーブってちょっと前からあった曲のようですけど、このヒーターバーブの歌詞の中に前のアルバムのタイトルが歌詞の中に出てきますよね。とても興味深い曲だと思うんですけど、この曲をアルバムの1曲目にしているということ、そしてこの曲について少し語ってもらってもいいですか。
Yeah, it's a really unique song, I think. I remember hearing, when we put it out just recently, I've had a lot of interesting feedback, and all very good, and it's actually very exciting, and this is in fact the oldest song on the album. It was, I think, about 5 years now. We were writing this before we really got out on the road, and before we signed so many contracts and blah blah blah, and so it lent itself really well to this album, and I think that's why it hasn't been on a previous album, because it didn't seem to fit a certain vibe of any of the particular previous albums. So so we did refurbish a bit. We kind of pulled it off of the shelf, dusted it off, re-explored, and I decided that this song kind of felt that you were traveling from one thing to another, and then upon that first verse arriving, and to me it was an extension from the Peaceful Army and the anthem of the Peaceful Army, and arriving on the Battle at Garden's Gate. So it does help sort of interweave this sort of parallel universe that we're creating in the world that we're building. And there are certain themes throughout the entire album that are connected to Anthem of the Peaceful Army. So it is in fact an evolution of a very similar, I guess a place that you would recognize. There's certain characters and themes and places that might still exist within this. So that's kind of the logic behind that being the opening track, and that intro is always, I think really appropriate for opening up anything, any sort of. So that worked out really well, and I actually remember being very a little bit determined to get that intro to come through. I wanted to do something a little bit more spacey or euphoric or something like that. So I kind of really pushed through and thought, well, why don't we do this and that? So I'm rather proud. I'm gloating a bit, or I'm rather proud to say that I could build that. And I, in my mind, had sort of Pink Floyd maybe in the back of my head, kind of pulling strings.